Alright, we're at the Sphinx today. We're gonna take a discovery tour here. When I was a kid, we were learning about this new theory that, the Sphinx was far older than previously thought, that it wasn't built at the time of the pyramids, but much earlier, maybe even thousands of years earlier, back in the age of Leo, and that's why it was shaped as a lion, and all this stuff. It was based on water erosion around the enclosure here, and they estimated that there just hadn't been enough rain to cause that erosion, unless you went really far back in time, back when the Sahara was green and yada yada yada. But nowadays they've re-estimated the geologists have put new estimates about the rainfall patterns, and we no longer believe that it's that old. There still are questions about the Sphinx, which we'll get into a little bit today, but yeah, let's just start the tour.
Welcome to the Riddles of the Sphinx. A sphinx was originally meant to be a personification of the king. The human head, wearing pharaonic regalia, was fused with the body of a lion, thus sharing the qualities the powerful animal possessed, namely its power, the swiftness of its attack, and its majestic authority. By these very virtues, it was also considered a symbol of protection. Unsurprisingly, statues of sphinxes could be found along the Dromas, protectors of the path taken by the gods to reach the temples.
So this is a picture of the Dromas with ram-headed sphinxes. So this was built First Dynasty. So the pyramids and the Sphinx itself was built in Fourth Dynasty, but this says here that this Dromos was built First Dynasty. The pyramids and Sphinx actually come from very early in Egyptian history. There's like 30-something dynasties, and this was built in like the Fourth Dynasty, so very early on.
Over the centuries, enthusiasts and historians alike have wondered, who built the Sphinx? For what purpose? And who does it represent? These questions remain unanswered. Several theories do exist, however, some more credible than others. One theory supposes that Jetafre chose to pay homage to his father Khufu by building the Great Sphinx of Giza. The stone temple on the eastern face of the Sphinx would have been added later on by his brother and successor, Khafre, in order to strengthen the divine worship of their father. It would be the first Egyptian temple oriented with the sun.
Amazing to think that this was the first temple oriented with the sun, since Egypt is like totally centered around sun worship. But again, this is very early in their history, so and yeah, they worshipped the pharaohs here as gods. Like, they would worship them after their death for centuries. I mean, you would come to this temple and there'd be priests set up to dedicate their worship to this particular pharaoh. So really cool to think about. I mean, it's not cool, it's kind of fucked up, because I mean, he's just a man, but they worshipped him like gods in their life and afterwards.
Another theory suggests that the Sphinx was built by Khafre and was meant to represent him. The arguments to support this hypothesis are based on the fact that the limestone beds used for the main work of the Temple of the Sphinx are geographically and architecturally similar to the Valley Temple of Khafre. Some believe that Khufu himself built the Sphinx, which was later finished under his successors, Jetafre and Khafre. These arguments are based on the stylistics of the engraving, the typology of the nemes, and the absence of a beard at the time of construction.
Yeah, so the Sphinx's head is a little too small for its body, so there's always been question about why that is. Was it recarved? What may have happened, and this is just an idea, but maybe it was originally with Khufu's face, but it was unfinished at the time of his death, and so then his sons, and maybe this guy carves it, and then this guy takes over and says, no, it should be my face. So it could have been carved multiple times, which is how it gets small. Or there could have been accidents while it was being constructed. Maybe the original face crumbled and they had to recarve it that way. But the fact that it doesn't have a beard, that's usually that's going to be a sign of a younger person, not an older pharaoh. So yeah, it was maybe one of his sons that recarved it, or maybe even began it in his reign. It doesn't have to have been. We just don't know with certainty when it was even carved or when it was finished.
While ancient Egypt as a whole leaves a rather monochrome vision of its monuments and statuary, it is vital to understand that in ancient times, absolutely everything was painted. The sun, eating away at the pigments of the colors, the sand, the climate, and the implacable impact of time unfortunately destroyed the glorious colors of the Sphinx of Giza. Documents from an Arab Egyptologist of the 12th century, Abd al-Latif al-Baghdadi, indicate that traces of red were still visible in his time. Today, however, the only color that remains are traces of red close to the ears of the Sphinx, as well as hints of blue and yellow on the nemes, traditional colors for that type of headdress. The pigments for the color red were man-made, obtained by mixing different products such as clay, quartz sand, and very finely crushed hematite.
This is another reason why I wish this game had been set in actual pharaonic Egypt, because then they could have displayed the Sphinx, in its full glory. Because even here, it's still in a ruined state. This is the Hellenistic Egypt, so this has already been conquered, first the Assyrians, then the Persians, and then now the Greeks. So, I don't know. I just wish it was actual. I wish we actually had an Assassin's Creed set in Egypt. We already have a Greek Assassin's Creed. That's Odyssey. So why was Origins set in Greek Egypt, or Greco-Roman Egypt, when it, I don't know, should have been Egypt?
Red had a strong symbolism in ancient Egypt. It was both the color of life and the color of death. It could represent the sands of the desert or the brilliance of the sun. Red was also associated with the god Seth, vengeful and destructive. The Egyptian word for red, Deshur, is also the word which was used to signify the desert, or the royal crown of Lower Egypt. In art, red was also the color used to paint the bodies of men, while yellow was used for women. It is possible that there were also color restoration efforts during the Saite period about 600 years before Cleopatra's rule, as indicated by notes on the inventory stele, discovered in 1858 by Auguste Mariette. It is because of this that the team made the decision to display it with its full range of colors, even though the Sphinx's colors would have likely faded by Cleopatra's time.
Yeah, so red is Deshur. This is the Deshret crown, the red crown of Lower Egypt, which is northern Egypt. It's a little confusing. Upper Egypt is in the south, Lower Egypt is in the north.
Dating from the 4th dynasty, approximately 2600 to 2500 BCE, the Great Sphinx of Giza is the oldest and largest sphinx that we know of. Carved from a natural limestone outcrop, the Sphinx measures 19.8 meters in height, 73.2 meters in length, and 14 meters in width.
So this is drawn up in 1853. Just showing it a bit before some of the modern reconstruction. There had already been ancient attempts at preserving it, so there were some stones like this already there. But this is what it would have, looked like before the restoration attempts. Much more like natural rock.
In order to bring polish to the imposing monument, several blocks of limestone were added after the initial construction phase. Since then, there have been numerous attempts at preservation. The polish present in the game integrates some aspects of modern restoration attempts. The team made this choice to present a more iconic version of the Sphinx of Giza to the player. Today, the Sphinx is called the Terrifying One. This appellation is translated from its Arabic name, Abu al-Hol, which in turn was derived from Baluba in Coptic.
Just to reiterate what she said right here, the team made this choice to display the Sphinx with some of the modern restoration attempts. To give you like they could have tried to present it as it was back then, although there would have been questions about how exactly it would have looked. I understand why they would want to make it look more like it does in modern times, because it would be more recognizable to people. But at the same time, isn't this an opportunity to give us that window into the past? I don't know. So the fact that it has so many restoration stones down there, that's anachronistic. It would have not have looked like that. It would have been much more natural rock at the time that this game takes place. But again, I really wish they would have done this in ancient Egypt during the time of the pharaohs, because then we could see the Sphinx in all of its glory, which is something we just can't see outside of a video game or a recreation like this.
The Sphinx as a whole was carved in situ from a natural stone promontory. Its head was built in a limestone peak of the Mukattam Plate, and the body was sculpted in the underlying rock layer where it is located. The degradation of the Sphinx is due in particular to wind erosion and the different quality of limestone used in its construction. The level of sodium contained in the groundwater which abuts the stone is also a contributing factor.
Yeah, when they found it, it was buried. Like when they found it in early modern times. Well, I mean, it's been buried multiple times, is what I'm gonna try to say. So, what you see today, it's been dug out again, and there's been multiple times in history where they've dug it out and restored it. I mean, that goes back to ancient Egypt itself, where they had to dig it out and restore it. So, just a really ancient statue. I mean, just look how messed up it is. But that's so cool. 4,500 years old. They carved this 4,500 years ago. Crazy. Oh, and yeah, the fact that it's in this like depression, it was the water erosion on this little enclosure that made people think that maybe this was older, that it may have dated back to a Neolithic like water catcher, like a way of catching rainwater in the desert. But that theory is that's not popular anymore. Although now they have found stuff under the pyramids themselves. I don't want to get too far in it. I mean, well, I'll ignore that for now, because that's like a whole other series of videos on its own. But yeah, they found some stuff under there. So this may have been a sacred site even back to the Stone Age. And so the pharaohs may have chose to build their pyramids and the Sphinx here because it was already sacred ground from earlier civilizations.
The natural bedrock is seen through the oblique natural strata of the Sphinx's body that are similar to the surrounding limestone.
So this picture's 1909. It's just so cool to see it throughout history in all its different stages.
Since antiquity, people have always believed there was a hidden tomb deep within the Sphinx. It is thought that attempts to plunder the Sphinx began as far back as the First Intermediate period. Since then, numerous attempts to pierce the Sphinx's secrets have been carried out, leaving indelible scars upon the monument.
So there were tomb robbers going back to the First Intermediate period. So Egypt is separated into 3 golden ages: the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. And between the kingdoms, they have intermediate periods where Egypt wasn't really unified. So First Intermediate period, they're already trying to plunder the Sphinx. So the Old Kingdom has collapsed, and they're already plundering their own ancestors' ruins. And this picture here, it was drawn in 1762. Clearly the guy never saw the pyramids themselves or the Sphinx. He's going off descriptions, so it looks all funky. But he did get it right. Like, there's 3 pyramids. One of them's real small. The face of the Sphinx is really messed up, so I mean, that's pretty good for a guy that never saw it. And that just shows how lucky we are in modern times that we can just take a, we can go to Google and see it. They couldn't do that for most of human history.
12 meters long and cut during pharaonic times, another entrance in the back of the Sphinx aroused curiosity. Although Thutmose IV attempted to seal it off, it was possibly reopened by treasure hunters. It was rediscovered by Howard Vyse and mapped more recently by Mark Lehner. This entrance at the back of the Sphinx leads to different cavities of a few meters each, in directions going inside the statue's body and under the surface. The team has used this opportunity to extrapolate a little more.
So this is why people thought there was like some hidden secrets under the Sphinx, because there's this little secret room in the back. I don't know how much of this is accurate, but yeah, they have a little engraving here, or inscription here, fresco, some little statues, an Ankh, a little statue of Bobby, Thoth Bobby. And then it's just a dead end down there. It's just an empty room and you can't see nothing, so there's nothing here really, but still pretty cool. So yeah, treasure hunters would come in here, and so I guess even the Pharaoh Thutmose IV had to seal it up because people kept going back there, digging around in there, trying to find secret treasure, damaging the monument.
While there have been no major discoveries pertaining to the Sphinx of Giza in recent years, theories and hypotheses continue to emerge. Without validation provided by archaeological sources, however, they remain unsubstantiated.
Yeah, it's a mysterious structure, and it's a mysterious civilization, and this is early on in that civilization, so there's lots of questions about it. People have lots of different theories, but we'll never know like full certainty about everything.
The first of the main theories as to the Sphinx of Giza's meaning posits that the Sphinx was originally a massive representation of the god Anubis. Its principal arguments are that the head of the Sphinx is disproportionate compared to the size of its body. The second theory believes that the representation of two sphinxes on the stela of Thutmose IV would indicate that another stone sphinx had existed on the site itself, possibly even in paired symmetry on the other side of the Nile. However, neither of these theories can be verified in any way.
So Anubis was the god of death, and he was a jackal-headed god, so an Anubis-headed sphinx would be a jackal-headed sphinx. If it was paired with one on the other side of the Nile, I mean, we would have found it by now, I would imagine. At least some evidence for it. Even if it was like totally ruined and eroded away.
Several scientific projects using new technologies have been put in place in the past decades. The most important was led by Mark Lehner and his team, who specialize in the study and survey of the Giza Plateau, including the Sphinx site. The mapping made it possible to see the materials used to construct the Sphinx, analyze the different layers of erosion, and figure out the most fragile areas to protect. After a few attempts at giving the Sphinx artistic proportions, the team instead decided to use photogrammetry mapping to faithfully reproduce the proportions of the Sphinx.
I would have still loved to see it, fully reconstructed as it was during the Golden Age. Like during the Old Kingdom, when it was fresh.
What the Sphinx of Giza represented during its construction and how the Sphinx was perceived by the Egyptians of the New Kingdom are two very different matters. Originally a representation of the king imbued with the power of the lion, the Sphinx was eventually viewed as a direct representation of the most divine. It is theorized that kings of the New Kingdom believed that the Sphinx of Giza was the one who recognized and legitimized the ruler of Egypt. Thus, despite the fact the Sphinx of Giza was partially buried under the sand during his reign, Amenhotep II knew that the monument was of great importance.
Yeah, so this is a cool little blue Sphinx from 3,400 years ago. Which is already like late into Egyptian history.
Amenhotep II built a second temple dedicated for the Sphinx as Horamakhet to pay homage to Khufu and Khafre, his predecessors. It became a common habit for this dynasty to spend time with their royal courts at the Sphinx. Its sanctuary became known as Setepet, the Chosen.
So a scarab inscribed with the throne name of Amenhotep II. So this temple was a place for them to govern, like the court, the pharaoh held court here. So again, we're looking at Egypt after it's already ruined. Imagine if they set this game, in the past. So this temple would have been about 1,000 years after the construction of the Sphinx, and they held court here. So imagine coming out, you're working with the government, you're working with Pharaoh, you come out of your office and here's the Sphinx staring at you with the pyramids in the background. Like, that'd be so cool. Like, this was their head of their government. Like, this was like their White House for a time. And it was 1,000 years after the Sphinx was built. I would have loved to have seen that time in Egyptian history. That's when Assassin's Creed Origins should have been set. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna let that go.
Egyptologist Mark Lehner believed that Amenhotep II built a statue of himself anchored between the paws of the Sphinx, likely to legitimize his reign, alongside a stela found by Salim Hassan. Many other pharaohs of this dynasty, such as Tutankhamun and Ramses II, also left marks of their passage in a similar fashion, sometimes even stripping the stones of nearby temples and pyramids to do so. Amenhotep II's son and successor, Thutmose IV, was a frequent offender.
Yeah, these guys would steal stones and columns and statues and stuff from other older sites. As someone who loves history, I hate it that they would destroy something, but they weren't as powerful as they like to portray themselves in their imagery and stuff. They're living in the Bronze Age. Like, it was just a very poor time, and it was hard to come across natural good materials and stuff. So they would just steal it from other older sites. It's just how it is. And they would add stuff. Like, he added this statue. This wasn't originally here. This little guy here, and the little rectangle behind him of brick, that wasn't originally there.
While sleeping between the Sphinx's paws, the future Thutmose IV saw in a dream the god Horamakhet proclaiming his coming accession on the throne of the two lands. This was, of course, on the condition that he remove all of the sand covering the Sphinx, which stood guard as the personification of the god, and should thus never be engulfed by the sands of the desert.
So even Thutmose IV, which is 1,000 years, I think, after the construction of the Sphinx, it's already buried by his time. He had to unbury it and add, refurbish it, add some stuff to it. But it would have maybe looked like something like this. It would have been buried. This is how it was in 1850, so pretty crazy.
The 15-ton dream stela built by Thutmose IV to commemorate his dream was discovered by an Italian Egyptologist, Giovanni Battista Caviglia, in 1818, when he undertook the task of freeing the Sphinx from the sand, which had yet again covered it. Caviglia was looking for an entrance into the structure of the Sphinx, but instead he discovered an open-air chapel and stelas between the paws. Ashes from a ceremony were still present. Protected by sand, they quite possibly were from the last ceremonies in Roman times.
Yeah, I mean, a pharaoh says, "Oh, I had a dream. We got to dig up the Sphinx," and then he puts his court over here. He builds this temple, holds his court here. So he adds a statue, a stele, makes a little chapel here, does rituals here, has his court here. 1,000 years after the Sphinx was built.
That same year, Cavillia discovered fragments of the Sphinx's beard that had probably been added during the New Kingdom. If many of these pieces are held by museums in Cairo, a fragment is displayed at the British Museum, along with a piece of the uraeus that was on the Sphinx's headdress. It is believed this fragment of beard was possibly kept in place thanks to the statue of Amenhotep II, which was supposed to be located under the head of the Sphinx.
So I'm a little confused because earlier it said it didn't have a beard, so I guess this beard must have been added later. I don't know. But you can see it's like he adds the statue, he adds that little stone rectangle part behind it, and then that holds up a beard. And maybe he added the beard.
A popular cultural legend purports that the nose of the Sphinx of Giza was lost during the time of Napoleon Bonaparte to the cannon fire of French soldiers in training. However, engravings from before the time of that campaign already depicted the Sphinx without a nose, indicating that it had been removed before the French campaign. The most plausible hypothesis is based on the research of the German historian Ulrich Harman. During the 1980s, Harman compiled medieval sources written by Arab authors. In doing so, he discovered that the Sphinx was once perceived as a favorable omen, a deity supporting sediment-nurturing floods and crops. Around 1378, a Sufi by the name of Muhammad Sa'im al-Dar could not stand this vision of the monument, and in an iconoclastic act, broke the nose of the Sphinx. According to the texts, he was then hanged and burned between the legs of the Sphinx for his crime.
Yeah, so a lot of people think that Napoleon shot the nose off, but they now believe that it was this Muslim guy that didn't like, it was blasphemy to think the Sphinx was cool or something. Anyway, so that's it. That's the here lies the statue of the great Khafre, the glorious, the respected one, under protection of Ra. Memphis and the great cities adore his face and make great offerings to his Ka. Ka is like his soul. One day, as the sun was high, Prince Thutmose traveled here and rested under its shadow. As he dreamed, the great god spoke to him. Watch me, son, for I am your father, Horematket Khafre Ra Atum. Examine my body, left for ruins like a dying person. The desert that I used to rule now defies me. Before all who live, I will grant you the crown when you have relieved me of my burden. So that's the stele. And so that's the Sphinx. Pretty awesome. Anyways, join me for the next video. We'll keep looking around at the pyramid complex. All right, see you then.